When staying ahead of the business game is your aim, here in BIZNOMICS is where we deliver insight and intel to make sure that you get a competitive advantage over the rest. I'm Tharindu Amrasekara and welcome to your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. This is BIZNOMICS. The world of e-commerce, valued at more than $9 trillion worldwide and growing very rapidly. Even in Sri Lanka, we see massive potential. And one key aspect of this e-commerce is the seasonal sales. Well, when the New Year season is there, or even when it comes to special days, could be Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, even Black Friday, and so many other different special days of celebration. How is the potential of e-commerce in this? And if you are to ride that wave successfully, what do you need to know? To talk about this and more facets of this interesting topic, we have joining us, in fact, returning to BIZNOMICS, a very special guest, a specialist and expert in digital and e-commerce, who is none other than Ms. Muditha Premarathne. Muditha, welcome to BIZNOMICS. Absolute pleasure to have you back.
Thank you so much for inviting me back, Tharindu. It's a pleasure to be taking part.
Well, it's been quite a while since we had a chat. In fact, I think in 2020 we had our initial discussion. Now, that was about general e-commerce. I'm sure many things have changed in that as well now. But Muditha, the special focus today, the seasonal sales. Like I said, we talk about Black Friday, then we have the Christmas, we have the New Year season, Valentine's Day is coming up, and then we talk about Mother's Day, and even what has been developed by certain companies like Alibaba Group, for example, we talk about the 11/11, the Singles Day, and so on. How big are the seasonal day or the special day or the seasonal sales in Sri Lanka, especially for online platforms?
Well, Tharindu, I would say that these are actually very big. They are in fact called the mega campaigns, and that itself translates to, it gives an idea of the magnitude of these sales. If I were to just put things in perspective, if you have an average day's sale, it can go up to about 20x on a special campaign day of this nature.
Talk about return on investment.
As well as excitement, and also it's a kind of a catapulting effect, right? Because when it settles back on a new normal. And that is the intention of these mega sales, where, all the sellers, partners, brand partners, customers all get engaged into creating a bigger hype that kind of drives and accelerate the business.
So, do you see a lot of Sri Lankans also adopting to these? And we saw very interestingly some companies, they were saying, look, on the store, we will have the Black Friday only on that Friday, but on our online platform, we will have it going for Saturday and Sunday as well. I'll be very honest, I also did buy my favorite perfume during the Black Friday sales time. So, do you see a good response from the Sri Lankan market as well for these, Muditha?
Definitely, I think Sri Lankans are very adaptive to e-commerce, as well as these new concepts of mega campaigns, seasonal sales, and thematic campaigns. I think, like as you said, sometimes these get extended beyond a single day's campaign. That's possibly because the level of involvement and excitement that it generates, and by popular demand, it does get extended as well. Sri Lankans are very receptive towards these campaigns, I would say.
Okay, now I'm going to be a little bit more specific here. Now, Valentine's Day is coming up in February, and then we see Mother's Day. We do see that, even in Sri Lanka, these days are special, and of course we have in between we have the April Aurudu holidays as well. Muditha, how do you see the mindset of the typical Sri Lankan online consumer? I mean, especially during these time periods, what do you think really catching on fire?
Well, if you take like Valentine's Day, I think there is more interest in celebrating this among the younger generations, where they feel like, exchanging tokens of, love. And this is becoming quite prevalent as well. And when it comes to Mother's Days and Father's Days, I know there are certain people who think that you don't need a single specific day, but then again, like everyone's so busy, at least on a one single day, it's nice for people to, invest some time and thoughtful gifting.
Correct.
And this is what it's all about. I think that's, fueling the concepts and thematic campaigns. So when it comes to Aurudu, of course, Sri Lankans are known from very traditional times to, give and exchange gifts,
Correct.
visit loved ones. So this kind of drives also a lot of commercial purchases, not just for gifting, but also for treats, celebrations, fiesta. So I think in that time, I think the products that get sold or purchased is a much more wide spectrum of products as well. So there will be different behaviors during different campaigns.
Interesting thoughts there. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, Muditha, which is none other than the lack of dollars. Now, we see that it's a massive concern. Our official reserves from about over $3 billion around September, October is down to a couple of, just above $1 billion by end of November and so on. Now, and we see a lot of restrictions being put on, limits on foreign transactions. You have to sometimes call them and you need to get permission to make some transactions and so on. So you're someone who is there, in the front row witnessing all this action in the e-commerce space. The lack of dollars and the spending limits on foreign transactions, how do you see an impact on the e-commerce scenario in Sri Lanka?
Now, when it comes to the limits on foreign transactions, I would say this is quite beneficial to local players, right? Because it does prompt the customers to actually choose an online or offline seller who is, located in Sri Lanka. So in that way, I would say that, a fair bit of actually, if you take before these restrictions, a fair bit of shopping happens from local buyers from online websites that are located outside of Sri Lanka. So it's money outward remitted through the cards, which now is, much more curtailed due to the limits. And this translates to much more buying on local level. So I would say that is in the current scenario, at least, where, our own internal economy needs a bit of a boosting and, buying power infusing into it. I would say it's a good situation, a good impact. When it comes to, of course, the dearth of the dollars, the lack of it for importers, traders to bring in products.
Because e-commerce does have the traders aspect
traders
as well.
aspect, yeah.
You need the traders to come and sell on
sell
platforms.
the products, yes. And this is the saddest part, because how it affects most is the smaller and the medium scale importers, right, and the traders. Possibly the larger scale players have their own methods and mechanisms
Probably
to manage
bigger warehouses and bigger storages
as well as some form of currency availability.
Yes.
Whereas the larger trading population, which we know is very huge in Sri Lanka, because we are not like traditionally a manufacturing country, right?
Correct,
so
correct.
we are very well dependent on imports, and these traders who used to be trading, especially also on e-commerce actively, they don't have products at hand right now. So this is definitely a problem, and I'm sure it will contribute to the, the kind of contraction in terms of trading.
So when you look at 2022 as a whole, what are the big ticket shopping seasons that you expect? And how do you see the online shopping preferences of Sri Lankans changing over a time? Because you've been in this industry for a very long time. From, let's say, 5 years or 10 years ago to now, how do you see the shopping preferences changing? That's the first question. The second question obviously being 2022, what are the big ticket shopping seasons we are looking at, so that the business owners can actually get ready for it with various promotions and fancy offers?
So I would say over time, like, people have changed their attitudes towards celebration, right? We would have usually stuck to our New Year, 2 New Years, either the April holiday season or the end of Christmas season, kind of, or both, right? And now I think people find various moments and themes and kind of celebrations that they would have, or companies would have created for them to engage in a bit of, shopping fiestas, shopping therapy, I would say.
Yeah. Retail therapy.
Retail therapy, you call it, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think especially during these lockdown times and all, I personally feel it is indeed a therapy, because you are inside and there's nothing much to, excite yourself about. You don't get to go out much, you don't get to window shop, etc. So I think people actually did enjoy the browsing and selecting certain little things that they would get some enjoyment out of shopping. I would say that the shopping habits have changed, especially online, in the online space, in terms of traditionally it used to be a lot to do with electronics, but people have really moved into and being bold about even going and buying their clothing. Fashion has become a focus. People buy beauty products without much hesitation now. And I would also say the grocery arena is one of the most trending categories. So this is quite interesting because the shopper profiles are also not the normal like the typical e-commerce customers. Usually typical e-commerce customers would be much more Gen Z savvy, tech savvy. But when it comes to, I think, post pandemic and during pandemic, people were compelled to try out e-commerce, especially for groceries, right?
Correct.
Due to the need of the hour.
For sure.
And then most of them would have also continued, having realized how much time it saves them, as well as the convenience factor. And nowadays, just even traveling a 1 kilometer is no longer a very easy thing, right? There's traffic congestion, parking issues, as well as the time that it takes. So I think some of those customers who adopted it during that time due to the need of it has actually stuck by with it due to the convenience factor.
Are we seeing a future possibility, Muditha, where people will be staying at homes, busy on their phones, and there'll be lots of different distribution hubs and centers around the city? But we are talking about 15-minute city into the future, right? Where everything is accessible, we can get everything we need within 15 minutes or so. So, as you very correctly said, with more and more groceries and even simpler stuff being ordered online, there's a very high chance that this is here to stay.
For sure. I think this trend of Q-commerce is trending in many regions, even in the Asian region. For instance, for Pakistan, there are many startups that are coming and investing into Q-commerce, right? So it ranges, the delivery promise range from 10 minutes to 30 minutes, and people are really adopting this fast. So I think the phase of grocery retailing will definitely be, experiencing quite a bit of conversion to adopting e-commerce in time to come.
And with your regional experience, especially you worked with Pakistan, you've headed some of the largest organizations in that region as well. Do you see similar trends of e-commerce adoption in Pakistan as well?
Yes, actually, for sure. Like their level of adaptation in especially grocery fashion is actually well ahead of the curve than even in Sri Lanka, I would say. So I think probably due to the size of the market, there's a lot of investment that's happening, a lot of funding that's coming through. So this actually, facilitates the growth much faster. So you see a lot of fashion players in the space, a lot of beauty players, and they are like standalone sites that have a quite a stable growth and good potential as well.
Well, what about the online scams and keeping yourself safe on cybersecurity platforms? Let's talk about that on the other side of this short break. This is BIZNOMICS. Welcome back to BIZNOMICS, your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. I'm Tharindra Amarasekara. Our focus today is on digital and e-commerce, especially making things stick and click during the seasonal times and the big offer times. And joining me for this very insightful discussion is an expert in the field of e-commerce and digital commerce, who is none other than Ms. Muditha Premarathne. Muditha, now let's talk about the biggest concern that people have: safety. When I go and shop online, when I'm giving my credit card information, my credit card number, the CCV number at the back of the card, etc. Is it actually safe? This is a valid concern that people have. And we see worldwide so many hacker attacks taking place, so many ransomware attacks taking place. So let's get to the point here. Do you find it safe to be doing online shopping in Sri Lanka? And I think the more important question is, do we see a lot of cyber attacks taking place on Sri Lankans?
Well, I would say that the industry, the payment industry in Sri Lanka is very quite like, they have a lot of governance in place. The frameworks of issuing a payment gateway is very comprehensive. It's not something that can be easily, done by anyone to get a payment gateway installed. So what all these facilitates is a much more safer governance structure. What's important is that the public also should be quite aware of and be alert to make sure that they play within safe zones. For instance, if you go visit a site, you should be able to check whether it's a secure site. Which
How can I check that? How can a customer, let's say someone who is watching this show online right now, they are planning to go to a website and buy something. How can they be sure it's a secure site? What are the signs to look for?
So if you are actually typing out on a browser, you would see the green bar and the lock, right? This is a good indication for
That's
even
where
any
the
website
appears.
addresses. This is the
A green bar and a lock.
Yeah, lock.
A green bar and a lock. Remember that.
That would be your most easiest way to identify whether you are entering a secure site. And if you are entering such a site, that would mean that this website is working within a certain framework. And then when you actually go into making the payments, the checkout pages, you would be taken into certain internet payment gateway landing pages. This would be operated by very well-known banks or certain fintech organizations here that are governed by the central bank. So there is very little chance that if you are actually paying through such a site that you are going to be scammed. What's important for you to understand is there are certain quick pop-up ads that come on the internet from various outside country websites, or there can be various sellers online on social media who's asking you to deposit money or pay by the credit card, but you have they are not belonging to a governed structure. For instance, they might be just single entrepreneurs or just scammers as well, right? And then there is little laws to govern such. If you are a business entity, then it's much more easier for you to expect a certain level of financial as well as I would say like a safety for you to transact with them.
So Muditha, we see that in foreign countries, if there has been a cyber attack, by law that business is expected to come out to the public, to face the public and say, we've been hacked and we've taken these measures. In Sri Lanka, to my knowledge, such a law does not exist. And as a result, we don't hear, even in the traditional news or the media, we don't always hear about Sri Lankan companies getting attacked. From your experience, I don't want you to mention any names per se, but how safe is the overall cybersecurity infrastructure in Sri Lanka? Or do we see instances where even these big players are getting hacked?
So, as you said, I don't think companies would like to make it public for various reasons, right?
Because
obvious reasons, bad PR, and it alienates their customers, creates fear in their mind, etc. But I would say, as you said, it's also important for any entity to make it known to the stakeholders if something like that has happened. And I don't think, to my knowledge, such laws exist in Sri Lanka.
Unfortunately.
So I think this is where, of course, we are evolving in terms of the digital space, e-commerce, etc. And the laws governing it is still very much to do with the local offline businesses right now. So this space is still a greenfield area that needs to be worked upon. Yes. When it comes to whether we are very susceptible, I guess, as any other country or any other nation, if someone targeted, have some interest to create a targeted attack, we might be susceptible. But I also know that a lot of companies are taking measures to, beef up their strengths, firewalls, etc., as well as, have proper safeguarding measures to especially protect their customer data as well as transaction data.
Muditha, now when we talk about scams in the digital world, especially the e-commerce world, right? I want to have an open discussion with you here because you're an expert on this topic, and these are sometimes, as an industry observer, certain things that I observe, I wish to share with the audience as well. So you get a nice email saying it's from ABC company, let's say a famous e-commerce website, yeah? And when you open the email, yes, it has the logo, it has the branding, it has all the usual signs to make it look like it's coming from that particular company. And then people obviously fall to the trap, they click on it, they can get taken to a site where they enter their credit card details. But it's actually not from that original company. Because let's admit, you and I, we can easily design any website, put any logo we want, and make it look like it's from the company. But customers should know to check whether the URL is the original URL.
Yes.
Am I correct?
Definitely, that's what. So in the this is why I also said, it's on the onus is also in the public and the users to be very alert, given the fact that there is room for playing, right? In a fraudulent manner. So this is why, as you very rightly said, when such phishing attacks come in through emails, etc.,
you call them phishing attacks.
Yes. So because they try to extract your information out of you, in a bogus fashion.
Correct.
So
but the website looks exactly like the original
yes,
site. But if you look at the URL, it will be different.
They might also mention some name similar
Correct.
to it, spell it differently, add
Correct.
little hyphens, etc. Right. But you need to be well aware.
And Muditha, can I just bring an example here? Let's say if I have a website, let's say now my name is Tarindu, so tarindustore.lk. Just there's no website like that, hopefully not. But let's say that's my store name. But someone can make a website just like that with my usual logo, everything. And get a URL also. Maybe Tarindu Store, but this time with 2 U's. Yes. Or maybe Tarindu Store with no E at the end, just STOR.
Yeah.
But the customer should know to look at the URL properly and verify, is this the correct website? Am I correct?
For sure. And they should also, people might say, who has the time? But then it is, if you are actually inputting certain confidential data, sensitive data, or inputting your login details to some other landing page where, you should be very, very concerned and very
Correct.
Careful, as
Correct.
you rightly said.
And doesn't it help? Because today, a lot of, banks, they have a mechanism. I've activated it myself, where if I enter my credit card details somewhere, it will send me a SMS to my mobile, and with a special OTP. I think they call it one-time password. And only when I enter that, the transaction will go through. But some people don't even activate this.
Yeah, this is, I think people are in search of, shortcuts and faster checkout mechanisms. We do understand that it's very, the shopping experience is much more pleasurable when it is shorter as much as possible. But this OTP mechanism, the two-factor authentication, is very, very important step to safeguard yourself, because nowadays the online transactions are not even limited to small amounts, right?
True.
It can go up to millions even. So it is very important that you actually activate this mechanism so that no one can randomly use your card, or even if your card is stolen, that there's very little opportunity for big transaction to go through without your knowledge.
What are the pockets of growth you see in Sri Lanka for the e-commerce, or we call it e-tailing space, especially among the younger generations? Muditha, do you see more potential for this to grow? Or if not, where do you see the pockets of potential? Because for an investor or a business owner who is watching this show, who is thinking, okay, but there are so many e-commerce websites, there are so many e-commerce channels, which one has more potential? What do you think is the highest potential area?
So I think e-commerce is all the commerce that can also be done within the e space, right? So if you take lifestyle, there's so much that has not been explored as well by current e-commerce players,
Any
I would say.
examples?
For instance, like I think just now the loans, insurance, online insurance space, etc., is not
Just coming
something
in.
that's coming in. Even automobiles and interlinked services are a space that's not well developed here. I would even say that services sector, utilities, bill payments, etc., although players are just entering and setting up the infrastructure and, making it, just taking it to market, there's huge scope to grow as well. So I would also mention telecommuting. I think the market is, after the pandemic, a lot of organizations are very receptive towards telecommuters, right? Work from home.
Work from home.
And this, I think, is a very prospectful segment that no one has at the moment entered. If you take foreign space, there are a lot of telecommuting work sites, and this a lot of Sri Lankans already work in them as well. So why not something in Sri Lanka, for instance?
And Muditha, you mentioned a very interesting point about this telecommuters and people working from home. And in fact, now we see a huge shift towards the Great Resignation. We see an era where in America itself, from October, November, that time period, there is more than 2.4 million people who have resigned and they are staying at home. Even in the EU region, pre-pandemic to now, it's 2 million people less employed now. So with all these people staying at home, and we might see the similar trends in Sri Lanka because we are already seeing that in China and Japan. So with more people staying at home, and with lesser incomes, there are also the shopping patterns, where sometimes we see e-commerce sites coming in almost offering the same thing but with a price advantage where you can buy it cheaper. So what you're saying is it's important that these e-commerce players keep adapting to the changes and the trends in the market and offering to those changes and trends. Am I correct?
Yes, definitely. And I think, for instance, if you take the current marketplace scenario, you do see the price advantage is the biggest advantage the customers can get, right? And this is not just being put together by the platform owner, it's being pooled together, I would say, through many stakeholders. The sellers who are selling on board, like the platform itself, and then the banking partners, and the brands. So all of them come together to create and engage, an offer that engages the customer, convince them to purchase. And it is, I would say, at this time where economically people are in a, constrained situation, this kind of discounting mechanisms may possibly help people to, get by and overcome this time period where jobs are downgraded, jobs are being, shrunk, pay cuts are being applied. A lot of the scenario is right for people to get a economic benefit. Definitely, people are looking for it. Correct. At this moment.
And any e-commerce site providing that will get an advantage in the market.
Yes.
Some interesting thoughts there. Stay tuned. We will be back after this short break. This is BIZNOMICS. Welcome back to BIZNOMICS, and we are focused today on e-commerce. What makes things tick and click in this space? And we are in discussion with an expert on this matter who is none other than Ms. Muditha Premarathne. Muditha, now in marketing, we always say the importance of buyer behavior or the buyer psychology. So even for e-commerce, I'm quite sure that the psychology of the consumer, the online consumer psychology matters here. And I personally feel that a lot of organizations are making the mistake there. They don't try to understand the buyer behavior in terms of the psychology. What makes people buy, to come out of that shell to do something different, to put their credit card number and really end up buying something. What makes them do that? So this is where the buyer psychology comes in. And I want to ask you, as someone who has been very successful in this arena of digital commerce and e-commerce, let's talk about the Sri Lankan e-commerce consumer psychology. What makes Sri Lankans buy online? Explain to us.
Well, Tarinder, I think there are several factors, right? It is, if you will need to segment the buyer base, and each segment will have various factors that contributes to their buyer behavior. So, as we spoke initially also, there's one segment that shops online specifically because it's much more cost effective in terms of the discounts that are being offered. So, that's one factor.
Yeah.
And then there's also
the cost focus, or
cost
those
focus,
who are looking for the offers.
offers. Then I would say there's also another segment who finds it quite convenient. You order something, you don't have to go out, and you get it delivered to your doorstep. So that is another factor. Then thirdly, I think most of the websites, especially like it allows you to shop beyond your geographical boundaries, right? If you, there are websites or platforms that will feature products, like many millions of products that caters to very niche requirements of yours. So you might have hobbies, you might have interests that need certain specific products that you cannot easily get, right? And if you have websites that have like a wide array of products, so the availability across, like cutting across geographical markets, this is one of the key factors.
The
I would say advantage of choice, the range, the product range.
Correct.
And I think also the fact that people nowadays just feel that they are I think the lifestyles are changing. They are becoming busier. People, even if you take a student for instance, their lives are full of classes, extracurricular activities, etc., etc. And shopping now becomes increasingly from a more generic kind of an activity, right? That where you want it to be very clinical and you want to do it and with as less hassle as possible.
Correct.
So I would say these are some of the key factors that drives the consumer behavior online.
So normally when we design an e-commerce space, Muditha, there are a lot of concerns. Like for example, should we show the price or not? Yeah. What are the aspects of a particular like a e-commerce design that customers become very receptive to, especially in Sri Lanka?
So, depending on these factors, who we are speaking to, what segment we are pitching to, definitely the USP that we are putting in front of them should be highlighted.
Okay.
So, from
if it's the price,
if the price, if we are pitching free shipping, for instance, for products that are bulky, a prohibitive thought might be, this is convenient for me to shop online, but to get it into my house in a X place, I have to pay more. Now, if we want to overcome this consumer thought process, we might actually put a free shipping offer there. And then that is the highlighted USP. So, it depends on the conversion driver that we are applying to. And this has very specific differences from one category to the other.
Understood.
Yeah.
Muditha, there is another massive concern, especially among Sri Lankans, when it comes to e-commerce, the logistics aspect. Now, this can end up being a nightmare. For example, they have a massive concern that what we get is not what we really ordered. Number two, that they don't get it delivered on time. So, from a consumer perspective, why do these things happen? And from a business perspective, because you have dealt with the traders as well, what are the logistics concerns and the nightmares they face, and what can they do to really manage their logistics better? Let's talk about the consumer concern first, and then we'll come to the business logistics aspect.
Yeah. So, over the last 3-4 years, I would say that e-commerce growth has been exponential, right? Triple digit kind of growth. But this is driven through the companies, the platforms engaging in it, as well as the interest from the customer. And what has not happened at the same pace would be the logistic infrastructure gearing up, right? So some of the companies have invested in their own logistic pillars that have given to certain level of relief, but this is one of the biggest
So a lot of e-commerce sites are depending on third-party
third
logistics
party
providers.
logistic companies. So with this, what happens is that the control factor after you hand over a package to the third party partner, delivery partner, lies totally in the hands of the other service provider, and whether they complete that delivery within the delivery promise the company that made the transaction is sometimes a discrepancy. This is when a customer feels that, okay, I ordered, I got a delivery promise of 4 days, but it came in 7 days, etc., etc. So this is one of the concerns.
What about the concern that people say, I got what I didn't order, or I didn't get what I ordered?
Yeah, before I come to that, I also want to talk about the fact that most of the third-party logistic companies have not invested or are in the process still of investing into technology, systems, real-time data, etc., tracking solutions. What this also means is that they, like as they take on large volumes of the orders that is being driven through this growth in the e-commerce market, their systems are still manual, and that means they are updating manually a status update, and this may get delayed, etc., which hinders the real-time tracking possibility or integrating back into the larger e-commerce player, etc., etc. So this is one of the biggest problems. When it comes to people saying, I ordered one thing, I got another, well, this possibly happens mostly in a case of this is more likely to happen in a platform situation where a large number of sellers are selling within that platform instead of maybe a standalone company selling their own products. There itself also people who are working within the warehouse to make a mistake and pack a different product instead of the one that is ordered. So these difficulties or the errors happen because you have multiple orders, and at the time of packing you might pack something wrong,
the trader,
or you might actually pack the right thing, but in the time of handing over the shipping documentation, you might actually make a human error and swap the
so then the blame comes to the platform and not the seller.
Definitely, yes, because a customer does a transaction with the platform, and therefore they feel that is, and most of them may not also know that these platforms are, sellers are involved. So this is possibly where the feeling that they have been swindled or there's some fraud going on, etc. But most of these platforms also have very easy return policies, and if we are using an app or an online website, there are mechanics set up definitely for return processes, because people now entering e-commerce enters with the hope to succeed and grow this channel for the future, right?
Correct.
So, and that wouldn't happen by, swindling your customers or, with errors. So, therefore, there is always mechanisms put in place to safeguard a customer, and the customers need to actually become aware of them and use them so that they can even, human errors are possible as industries evolve, but, to make sure they get their due return product, etc., or a refund, there are processes in place, they need to use it.
Muditha, your advice to any company that is running their e-commerce platform, what are the critical investments they should do with regard to logistics?
So, definitely real-time tracking is very important if you are planning to scale, because customer as well as your control towers, your operation leads, etc., needs to know what's happening in terms of the movement of the parcels, right? And fulfillment centers make things easier for your sellers. Instead of doing the packing and handing over at their warehouse, and they might actually choose to hand over the goods to your warehouse on consignment basis, and this drives much faster lead times, much more better processes in terms of processing the order, where those kind of human errors that occurs from the seller side can be more limited because there's more stringent QC processes going on, a more in a different, like a larger scale warehouse operation. So these are some of the areas that I would say that companies need to invest into. One thing is, if any entrepreneur is moving into e-commerce, they need to realize that e-commerce, unless you are interested to just do a very niche site, this is a very volume driven game. And your systems, every infrastructure, your manpower, org structures, everything needs to be planned for future scaling.
Correct.
From very beginning. Otherwise, what happens is you develop certain infrastructure that suits very small scale, and midway growth comes in, the transitioning is very painful and very disruptive as well. So,
Muditha, on a final note, I believe we discussed this the last time we met as well. The policy changes in Sri Lanka for e-commerce and digital commerce to further pick up. What are the policy changes that you see to be essential?
So, I would say that, growth of e-commerce is anyway beneficial in many forms for the entire economy, in terms of inclusivity, in terms of having like a less capital intensive business models for people to enter businesses, create livelihoods, etc., etc. And I would say also the infrastructure that goes hand in hand, like logistics systems, delivery systems, etc. All these also has like large growth potential. So the impact economically is very wide, and therefore I think governments and legislative bodies should realize that the social impact that this industry can bring forth is quite significant. Hence, I think they need to look at facilitating businesses to actually reach that level of volume that I mentioned. It's only profitable, or they can only even sustain if they reach those volumes, because the kind of technology infrastructure, kind of logistic infrastructure, tech, knowledge, all those cost a lot, and it cannot be set up also in bare minimum, right? So when investments of this nature happens, it's also useful for the governing bodies to facilitate them in terms of taxation policies, in terms of support mechanisms, in terms of relooking and redoing certain blueprints of customer protection on e-space, what actually really treating now onwards e-commerce as a from a different point of view, and understanding its merits and seeing how it can be facilitated, while also creating a governance structures that increase that trust which consumers will have upon it, so that it can spread to wider audiences.
Some very interesting and valid thoughts there, Muditha, especially coming from you, someone who is in this industry very actively and someone who witnesses all the changes taking place in this sector. Thank you very much for returning to BIZNOMICS and sharing your thoughts and enlightening our audience members as well on what to get right with regard to e-commerce. And we wish you good luck with all your future endeavors this year and beyond.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure taking part and talking on this industry that I am also keenly involved in.
Thank you very much, Muditha.
Thank you.
No matter what business you may be in, at some point or the other, you will be entering e-commerce. Perhaps you are already in it. And if so, now you know what to get right. Get your logistics right. Get the security right. And if you're an ordinary or an average spender on e-commerce, make sure you don't just go trusting blindly, but look for the signs to make sure that e-commerce space is a trusted one. I'm Tharandu Amarasekara, and no matter what business you may be in, have a profitable week ahead.